Welcome, everybody, and welcome to everybody as you enter this Zoom today. My name is Tamar Tights Fields, and this is the Choosing a Shared Future event. Welcome to all of you in the Valley of Western Mass and other guests who have come to join us today. Nancy Flam and myself wish you a warm welcome and thank you for joining us this afternoon. I would like to start by thanking our co-sponsors, Congregation B'nai Israel, Lander Grinspoon Academy, Beit Ahava, Temple Israel of Greenfield, and the Jewish community of Amherst. I want to thank Miriam Cudler-Flam, our Zoom administrator, for organizing the technical aspects of this Zoom. If you have any technical problems during the Zoom, please send her a message in the chat at the bottom of your screen. She's titled Admin Miriam. And please remember to keep your mic on mute during this event. One of our goals for bringing Standing Together speakers to our community here in the Valley is to spark hope. I'm happy to share that today we have about 380 participants registered for this event. This already sparks hope. Another goal is to build resilience and solidarity in our community. All of you here today represent the broad spectrum of our Jewish community in this valley. We are of different generations, different Jewish affiliations, and different political perspectives. We have come here together to learn and to listen to each other and perhaps plan next steps together. After careful thought in planning this event, we decided to focus on bringing together the Jewish community here in the Valley in a way that can open up intra-community dialogue. We hope that after today, there will be people who want to establish a Friends of Standing Together chapter. And at that time, it is our intent to design all future Standing Together programs with the broadest and most inclusive invitation possible. Like so many of you, since October 7th, my heart has broken over and over. And as I continue to hear about the atrocities that have been committed and continue to happen in Gaza, the West Bank, and Israel, my heart continues to break. Learning about the work of Standing Together gives me hope. Today's event is titled Choosing a Shared Future. We will be hearing from two outstanding human beings from this organization, Sally Abed and Nadav Shofet. We are so grateful that they have made time to speak with us today, and of course, it is quite late in Israel right now. Standing Together is a grassroots organization of Palestinian Jewish leadership that was founded in 2015 to build peace, equality, and climate justice. In the midst of the most recent horrific violence and ongoing suffering, they are doing the enormously brave, empathic, and powerful work of asking people to resist the urge to choose one side and dehumanize the other. We will hear all about how they are forging this path forward in an effort to create systemic societal change and work towards peace and equality. Now, a quick orientation for today's events. First, we will hear from our two speakers, followed by a Q&A. Please write your questions in the chat. If possible, please write the word question in capital letters before your actual question to help us sift through the chat and find all the questions. After the Q&A, you are invited to join one of 8 breakout rooms for a chance to share your thoughts and ideas with the community. These rooms will be facilitated by members of our community who will help establish a tone of respect and best practices for sharing. The breakout rooms will have different topics, so you can choose the topic that most interests you. We will also be sharing a Google form in the chat during this event a few times so that you can let us know if you'd like to stay in touch and continue to receive emails from us regarding future engagements. Now I'd like to introduce our speakers. Sally Abed is a member of the national leadership at Standing Together, the largest Jewish Arab movement in Israel. In recent years, Sally has become a prominent Palestinian voice in Israel, advocating progressive causes for social and climate justice, and highlighting their connection to the struggle for peace and an end to the occupation through building a new majority in Israeli society. Sally is the co-host of Groundwork, a podcast produced by Yoshi Fields about Palestinians and Jews refusing to accept the status quo and working to change it. Nadav Shofet is a member of the national leadership of Standing Together. He is the community organizer for the movement's Tel Aviv-Yafo local chapter, and following October 7th, he took part in founding the Jewish Arab Solidarity Guard in the city. He is also the coordinator for Standing Together's new global community, Friends of Standing Together. Previously, he has been active in the movement's chapter in Tel Aviv University, where he studies philosophy, and in LGBTQ advocacy organizations in Israel. I'd like to turn it over now to Sally and Nadav.
Thank you so much, Tamar. Thank you all for having us.
Thank you. Thank you, Tamar. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Miriam.
Okay, so we were requested to also introduce ourselves, not just with our bios, but really of how we got to Standing Together, and hopefully you will get to know a little bit about the movement from us. Standing Together for me was a political home that I didn't know existed, and I didn't know it could exist in Israel. You know, coming back, I actually studied in the US, growing up as a Palestinian in Israel, in the north of Israel, and really going to the US and getting politicized, having for the first time a safe place as a Palestinian, building my narrative, my history, my culture, my views, my perspective on how politics actually work, meeting Jewish diaspora for the first time, meeting Palestinian diaspora and Palestinians from Gaza and the West Bank for the first time on equal ground, you know, my age, meeting Black Americans, meeting Latinos, and really trying to understand how can we you know, what's the common thread between all of us, and I really built the kind of politics that understands you know, the interconnectedness of struggles, but also the very importance of organizing. I studied at Earlham College in Richmond, Indiana, and we were the first or second college to ever divest from polluting industries, and it was exactly because we organized. You know, all of these different groups that I just talked about, you know, we organized, you know, the different clubs, the different struggles, the different groups, and it was amazing to see that kind of power. I came back home 2015, really the year that Standing Together was being founded. I didn't know that back then. And it was a very difficult year. It was a year after 2014, after another Gaza war, up until then the deadliest Gaza war in 2014, and which was followed by a wave of violence, especially in the West Bank and in East Jerusalem, what was called the knifing intifada. And Benjamin Netanyahu back then had a very famous saying. He said, "Le'ulam nichya al kherev," we will forever live on the sword. I think that was his rhetoric, you know, that he has established and that he continues to hold, right? You know, we will never be able to, you know, the security of Israel and Israelis necessarily means the subjugation of Palestinians. You know, it necessarily means military control, because there is no partner, and we will forever live on the sword. And you know, 7 years later, 8 years later almost, this is just so much more stark than ever, you know, this reality that we are in, where we are stuck, you know, as a society, in this endless cycle with no alternative. No one is giving the Israeli public an alternative. No one is telling them it can be different. You know, very few people are telling them it can be different. And we can see that with the right wing, you know, playing in an empty field, you know, scoring goals for years now, and getting stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. And we saw a year ago, it was really the peak of that, with the catastrophic ultra wing, you know, settler government that we have right now, that you know, got us to where we are today in many ways, and obviously, you know, maintaining this kind of retaliation and this kind of reaction to the catastrophic massacre on October 7th. And back then, I think what got me to Standing Together, and I really want to be very respectful of the time, and really try to get you to where I was. It wasn't anything about the occupation that actually got me into Standing Together. I was just a young Palestinian woman, you know, in Tel Aviv, working in a high-tech company that called me for a hearing for referring to my society as Palestinian. I was paying 40% of my rent, of my salary in rent. I was, you know, suffering with the heat, really worried about climate change and about, you know, the fact that the city doesn't really have any answers for me, you know, for increasingly hot summers. I was worried about you know, the people around me. I see people increasingly getting poorer and poorer, and people getting more segregated and more racist and more just hateful, and just everything around me just seemed, and I didn't know where to go, not as a woman, not as a Palestinian, not as a young person who lives in Israel. Like, I didn't know where to go. And Standing Together was then actually mobilizing sorry, I'm sorry, long day. A struggle or a mass protest against the deportation of asylum seekers from Sudan and Eritrea. And it was an amazing struggle that, you know, really connected the residents of southern Tel Aviv, which are predominantly from Mizrahi descent, you know, also very marginalized, very poor, very, very neglected in southern Tel Aviv. And they organized them to actually protect and work with the asylum seekers. And I remember the signs. I went through the protests, and the signs were both in Arabic and Hebrew. And I just remember this invitation to this social justice cause that had nothing to do with me as an Arab Palestinian. It didn't segregate me. It didn't invite me just to save me, but actually invited me to save others, because we are part of a larger majority. And I think that's exactly what Standing Together is trying to do. And when it comes to you know, where we are right now in this junction, you know, when we talk about a peace movement, building a peace movement, it's not merely a peace movement, but really one that understands this new majority and understands how we can actually build a people's movement around issues of peace, equality, and social justice. So I'm going to stop here and let Nadav talk and introduce himself.
Thank you, Sally. So yes, my name is Nadav. I'm 30 years old. I live in Tel Aviv. I'm the community organizer for our Tel Aviv Yafo chapter. And I grew up, always somewhat political and politically aware household. Um, but my kind of journey through life has always been pretty um, in pretty as what's been expected. I went to school, I joined the military, I was even an officer in the IDF. And then later I went to work in high tech. I was a product manager for a high tech company. Um, but as time went on, and although I was somewhat active in political spheres, I was active in the LGBTQ activism community, and I was always kind of worried about where our country was going, and always had opinions on it. But I was never, it was never really, something that took up most of my time. And the first time I encountered Standing Together was in 2020. There were mass protests against Benjamin Netanyahu and against his government during COVID. And I remember I went to these protests in Jerusalem, and I go and everybody's talking about how we need to oust Netanyahu. And then there was this group of people again with these purple signs in Hebrew and in Arabic, and the signs said education, healthcare, and welfare. And I was like, who are these? Who are these purple people speaking in Hebrew and Arabic, talking about issues that I care about? But why are they talking about Netanyahu? And I was very intrigued by this. I felt like the language was very, very different. And of course, this was different times. Today, our focus is, around the war and around the need for Israeli-Palestinian peace and equality between Jews and Arabs inside of Israel. And these are our core tenets of Standing Together. But at the time, during this COVID crisis, which was a civilian crisis, Standing Together was talking about people's actual lives. And I remember being very kind of intrigued by this. And I started following Standing Together on social media, following Standing Together's leaders, listening to the podcast that Standing Together has. This in and of itself is a testament to how many ways we at Standing Together work very hard on accessing ourselves, making ourselves accessible to the public. And I started kind of getting into the Standing Together world, just looking at it from the side. But again, not really taking real part in it. And this all changed after about a year ago, when there was the last general elections in Israel, which led to the formation of this government that we see today, that is the most extreme right-wing government we've ever had in Israel. And of course, I think we can see the current war, which is not just mismanaged, but also really taking us down a path that is really just destruction and war as a solution to people, and not anything hopeful. After the elections, I remember waking up in the morning and seeing that the side of the political map got 64 seats, and I just started crying. The entire morning I just cried my eyes out, because I felt like there was no hope. There's nothing to stop this government. What can be done? And the next day I was invited to a Staying Together meeting at Tel Aviv University, where I studied. And I knew they had like a chapter there, but I never really got involved. And I went to this meeting. It was important for me to go to this meeting. And I went to this meeting, and I immediately heard this strategy, this messaging that was so refreshing to me. And not just is it refreshing the view of how we can work together, Jews and Palestinian citizens of Israel, to make change, but also just this clear strategy in order to make change. And that's something I never heard anywhere else. Standing Together has this clear strategy to win, right? To change society. We believe in it. But it's not something I've ever heard before. Other organizations I've took part in never thought, it's always like, we'll do our best, or it's the moral thing to do. But no, we're in it to actually change things.
To win
it. To win it, in it to win it. Exactly. So that was my first steps in Standing Together. And one of the first things I took part in the student chapter was the fight against the eviction of a student dormitory. And this contractor bought the student dormitories, and then they decided everybody would be evicted. And our student chapter in Tel Aviv University decided to take this on and to organize the tenants of the dormitory to fight the eviction. And amazingly, I thought it had no chance. I was new as an activist. I thought it had no chance to win. In 10 days, we were able to organize a protest against the mayor and get the media involved and get all the tenants to rile up and to oppose this thing. And in 10 days, we were able to cancel this eviction. And I was like, wow, this works. This strategy of if we organize Jewish and Palestinian citizens of Israel according to their common interests, then we can actually achieve change. If we're not preoccupied with trying to fight or even to mediate between the two sides, but just to fight together for what our common interest is, the power is so overwhelming, and change can happen. And that's the strategy of staying together. That's the strategy of staying together. And we see it today in this war. We are firmly saying that the only way out of this war is a ceasefire agreement immediately to return the hostages and to end the killing of innocent lives in Gaza and this endless amounts of suffering in Gaza. But also the way forward is to achieve Israeli-Palestinian peace. And this is in the interest of everybody who lives here. So that's what guides us. And that's how I joined Standing Together. And I want to segue into just a little bit of history about Standing Together and how we were formed and what we're doing and how we're built, basically. So Standing Together, I think Tamar said this as well, was founded in 2015. In some ways as an offshoot or a conclusion from the 2011 protests. I don't know if who was on this call remembers or knows, but in 2011 there was mass protests against the government surrounding welfare, surrounding cost of living issues. And this was amazing protest. Hundreds of thousands of people went onto the streets. This was the largest protest to date back then in Israel. But it did not end up creating change. People came to these protests week after week, eventually to the million-person protest. It was 400,000 people, but it was called the million-person protest. But it eventually did not create actual change in society. And what the founders of Standing Together have figured out, and I was not one of them, but I appreciate them, of course, is that it's not enough just to bring out this energy that happens in protests. We have to organize people based on their interest to create a mass movement that can force political change. We believe that change doesn't happen, in the few people or in the parliament or the leaders who speak to us through TVs. We say change happens here on the ground by the people, for the people, right? So that's why Standing Together has taken upon itself to be very, very, very excellent at organizing. And we've studied this from organizations abroad, including from the US, and we do training on organizing people in Israel, training to make leaders who can organize people. And we push people towards this, all in order to create a mass movement that can force political change. And that's the basis of what we're doing. And what kind of political change? I just want to make this very clear. Peace, equality, and social justice. That's what we're for. And we believe we're going to achieve it. So right now, just to say what we are doing right, how we're built as a movement, we have local chapters all over Israel, over a dozen, and we have chapters in student campuses and universities and in colleges all over Israel. All of these chapters are joint Jewish and Arab, and we're working all over Israel. Of course, we have presence on social media and so forth, but the basis of what we're doing is organizing people around these goals of peace and equality and social justice. Today we are the largest Jewish Arab movement in Israel, and I would say the largest grassroots movement on the political left in Israel, period. So maybe now we'll talk a little bit about what we've been doing during the war. Sally?
Yeah, absolutely. I see the questions and I'm already want to answer them, but I think I do want to say, that when Nadav spoke about the chapters, we're also a democratic movement. Actually, next week on Friday, we have our National Assembly, National Convention. We're going to elect our leadership again. So when we say that we're part of the leadership, we're actually elected leadership by our over 5,000 members that also have, we have national elected leaders from these conventions, but we also have representatives from these chapters and these student chapters. One nice anecdote is that this week we actually elected 13 different representatives, right, at Hebrew University. 13, was it? Nadav, you know better than me.
You mean in the elected leadership stand together or the student union?
Student unions, as well, like student unions and Hebrew University.
We have 30 people have been are running for the elections right now.
Are running, and 6 of them are who are the 13 that are actually automatically going to be represented. 6 of them are actually Palestinian. We're the largest organized represented group in student unions. We also have a social media, an alternative media platform. We have podcasts. We're really trying to create institutions, a political current, a new political current, and really understand how we can, what actually modules deep change is institutions, cultural, political, economic institutions. And that's what we try to do as a movement, and really work with amazing partners around us as well, who provide many of these institutions or alternative visions that we see. Our work on October 7th, we were very lucky to be in a movement and be able to react as fast as we did, as efficiently as we did. I think the very first reaction or need that we had, the first emergency or mission, was to de-escalate, make sure that we don't have intercommunal violence, especially in mixed cities, that we are able to not only promote solidarity and partnership, but really prevent actual violence and actual altercations. And we were able to do that through the fact that we had already organized intentional Jewish Palestinian communities across the country. And we were able to actually expand them beyond our existing chapters, which are now becoming, we're establishing as chapters. So we're able to grow, even through crises, we're able to grow. So the first thing that we did was really the Jewish Arab Solidarity Watches across the country, which did a lot of mutual aid at the beginning, and just provide a lot of help also for the impacted families, from the south, who were all across the country. We were able to provide also just aid and help and support to communities that were impacted by racism, in different areas, and to individuals that were impacted. We were able to monitor violent speech also online and just physically, and be able to put positive messaging all across the country. And that was our very, very immediate thing. The second thing that we did was a support line. We supported hundreds of mainly Palestinian, but also Jewish activists and just students, people who got fired from their jobs, who got suspended from universities. We were able to support them both legally, politically, and socially. Through our support, HUD support line. And obviously we rallied people. Now, 4 months later, it seems like everyone is going out on the streets, standing together, when literally no one was going out. Everyone was just paralyzed with trauma, but also with just hate. And people really had no space to grieve, a space to actually grieve. It felt like everything was just feeding, the politics, and our leaders were just feeding on this trauma and on this pain and loss, and really which amplified a lot of revenge, a lot of hate speech. And we were able to actually create a lot of rallies, solidarity rallies. So I would think like the first 6 weeks, we were very focused on like social and communal immunity, you know, just really make sure we grieve safely as two peoples, which is really, it was essential. I think I cannot overstate how important it is to be able to grieve safely for both peoples. And I cannot overstate how near impossible it is to do in Israel, really, to grieve safely. Especially for us Palestinians, this unfortunately remains relevant right now. I usually don't, I try not to talk too much about what's happening in Gaza. It just feels like surreal to me that we have to like talk about it. Like it's something that is actually happening, like we have to talk about it because it needs to stop. It just feels surreal to me that we need to talk about it, like, that it needs, sorry. But it's definitely, the movement is still, and up until this day, providing the essential space for Palestinians to grieve safely, and be political about it, and really dare to dream, and talk and speak up. And this is still happening all across our communities. It's still happening all across our campuses. It's still happening in our seminars. We have a lot of training workshops and training seminars for our leaders and new activists. And we're not only providing them with a safe space to be, but also empowering them with the right tools and knowledge and support to also act and be courageous enough to act, because it's what we see right now is a very, very high level of submission of Palestinian citizens of Israel, and almost paralysis, with a deep trauma, but also a very heavy persecution that happened at the very beginning that really just was very, very effective. We are quite deterred, quite effectively deterred by the police, by universities, by institutions, by workplaces. Right now, what we're trying to do is really escalate the message from solidarity and partnership to a much more political, courageous, let's say brave message of peace. Really understanding, that this is a historic junction where we need a political movement, a leadership that can give the Israeli public an alternative. And we looked left and right, and we understood that we're going to lead this new movement. We're going to be that movement. For many years, we really obviously led anti-occupation efforts and peace efforts, but a lot of our efforts was also on climate justice, on, livable wage and affordable housing and public transportation, and really try to understand how do we get to the peripheries of the Israeli society, and disconnect their automatic affiliation with the right wing, right? And create a people's movement, create relevancy to these peripheries that have been abandoned by the left, the so-called left, for decades. And now we understand that when we talk about peace, this is exactly what we need to do. When we talk about peace, for me as a Palestinian, peace has a dual meaning. It's liberation and freedom, but it's also for me as an Israeli safety, which I think, safety and security, which is something that has been monopolized by the right for many years, right? They are the experts of security. The left, they don't know how to do security. They're like peaceniks, who don't know how to do security. It has been monopolized, and this conception has been shattered on October 7th. And it's time we reclaim peace through monopolizing security back, because only peace will bring security. And that's the motto of our campaigns across the country. We're not screaming and shouting the ugly truth in the face of the Israeli public. We're not morally lecturing them. Obviously, we are still holding our truth about the atrocities that are happening in Gaza and in the West Bank. But we also understand that in order to build the political will to end this reality, we also need to talk about the interest of the Israeli people to end this cycle of violence and to end the oppression of Palestinians. Not only ceasefire, but really in the context of decades of an oppressive regime in the form of siege, in the form of military control and occupation, and also here in the form of persecution, systemic discrimination, incarceration, and police violence within Israel. And we understand that these things are interconnected, and they can only be co-led by Palestinians and Jews in Israel. It can only be a joint struggle. There's no other way. And we understand that. And that's what we're going to continue doing. And hopefully, we have many plans on growing, and we are growing. Sometimes it feels a bit lonely. It feels like we are being attacked from every side. It's almost comical, like on both sides. Like we're someone mentioned the BDS here. Like it's funny to me that we're like literally the most radical left in Israel, and then we're like, we have a condemnation from the BDS, and I have to justify myself as a Palestinian to like white people in the US, but we are definitely validated every single day, seeing our growing numbers and seeing, the reactions of people that come to our meetings and to our protests and really joining our communities. And I'm very grateful to be able to be part of this. I can't imagine it any other way. I would really be devastated, quite devastated and despaired otherwise.
Thank you so much. Tamar, did you want to say a word?
Yes, thank you. Mina, if you want to pin me for a second.
Oh, I'm sorry. Hang on one moment.
That's okay. I can start by just saying thank you, Sally and Nadav. We so appreciate your work, and you speak so calmly and clearly, and yet I know you're on the street and you're, with people, and you're dealing with enormous stress. And we're so grateful for you to come and just share and educate us and tell us how this all came to be. We're in the part of our program for Q&A. Thank you for putting questions into the chat. You can still continue to put questions in the chat. We probably won't get to all of them. We have a lot of people on this call. But we will take a look at all your questions even after the event. Nancy Flam, the co-chair, will be looking through the questions, culling through them, and posing the questions to Sally and Nadav. So please remember during the Q&A to stay on mute. Thank you. Go ahead, Nancy.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Tamar, Sally, Nadav. So yeah, many wonderful questions. So we'll keep it moving. What Marielle asks, what is our role as American Jews in stopping the massacre in Gaza? How can we best support you? big question. You're not American politicians, but I'm sure you have views.
I can speak for
Yeah.
a few ways that that people can support staying together from abroad. Yeah, I think your initial kind of reaction there, Nancy, is correct in the sense that we're not acting in American society, and we're not acting in American politics. We're very, very focused on changing Israeli society from within. That's our focus. But having said that, we've been receiving a lot of support from abroad recently, since the war started. A lot of support and a lot of interest. So we're still. I want to start by saying we're still figuring out how to channel this support to something that is very impactful for our movement and for the way that we're putting forth. That's kind of an introduction to what I'm about to say, where there's a few ways people can support our work from abroad. One is become a friend of Standing Together. This is a new global community we've opened up just 2 months ago, and we already have 1,600 members. This is kind of the mirror image of membership inside of Israel. Every one of those 5,000 plus members in Israel contribute monthly sums to Standing Together, a monthly sum of their choice, and become members. And this is what we are offering for people abroad as well, to join us, to join our global community with a monthly sum of your choice, and also be part of our community, be having a part of exclusive conversations with us. Just 2 hours ago, we had a conversation for Friends of Staying Together, specifically a deep dive about our student chapters, just as an example. So if this is something that you're interested in, please join us, join this conversation, join this global community of Friends of Staying Together. Of course, you can also make a more direct, one-time donation. But I will say also, we need this way that we're putting forward, which is a kind of a third path, a way forward that provides solutions and hope, and recognizes the right and the need for everybody in this land to just keep on living here. We know there are millions of Jews living in this land, and they're not going anywhere. And there are also millions of Palestinians living in this land. They're not going anywhere. And this is kind of an opinion that seems so obvious, but it's not put forth on the global discourse. So be part of our global discourse that we're putting forward. It's not our original idea, but it seems so obvious, of course, once it's put on the table. But be part of this. We want our way to be a path people can choose, also in the global discourse, which affects what's happened here in Israel, Palestine. So those are just a few ways. We also have, I'll just say one more thing. We also have local WhatsApp groups that are organizing, starting to organize around support for Standing Together, and the way that we're talking about. We have a breakout room about this. It's all still in the making, but that's where we're going. Sally, do you want to add to that?
Very, very quickly, as American Jews, what you can do to stop the massacre. I think all of us, we're all having, various, diversity of tactics, right? Everyone has their own function. And I think in your own society, especially as Jewish Americans, understand how you can put pressure on your representatives, on your politicians, which I know is actually happening right now. And unfortunately, we also know that that's not working. Even when your politicians are putting pressure on our politicians, it's still not working. So in many ways, I do think it's a collective effort, when it comes to really stopping the massacres and stopping, just a permanent ceasefire. It really is going to be a very collective, global work. But I do want to say that the Israeli public has the most power to do this. And we, and that's, out of understanding, the power differential. As a Palestinian, I also understand that the Jewish Israeli public has the most power. to actually impact this and actually advance a ceasefire. And we're doing this not only through calling for ceasefire, as I said before, to stop the killing of innocent people in Gaza, but we're also trying to mobilize people and promote and support the hostage families here out of a leftist agenda, and really try to understand how we can promote and link the struggle of the hostage families, not only to bring out the hostages, but really out of a longer term agreement for peace and ending the occupation. And you can support that. I think as Jewish community and Jewish diaspora, you can definitely just promote the idea that Jewish safety is necessarily linked with Palestinian freedom.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Sally. Did you want to say another piece? No. Okay. So many questions. Goodness. Marty is wondering if you take a position on a two-state solution. Do you approve of the Biden administration's push in that direction? Just to follow up on kind of the U.S. Connection here politically.
We don't have a stand on how just peace would look like, how the two peoples who live equally, independently and freely, how it would look like. We do understand that a sovereign Palestinian state is a necessary step towards true justice, and we understand that it needs to happen. And we understand that it needs to happen through a political will abroad, such as Biden's administration, and I hope that he remains there, and I hope people vote for him, even though he's not calling for a ceasefire. Not because I don't have criticism for him, just because the price of not having that is going to be not only catastrophic for Americans, it's going to be catastrophic for Palestinians and Israelis if Trump wins. But we also understand that we need to build that political will to end the occupation here. And yes, it means advocating for a sovereign Palestinian state. Will this bring us the sustainable future and the historic justice and the equality that we all actually deserve? Probably not, but it's a necessary step towards envisioning a sustainable future.
Thank you. Jane and others, and Alice and others ask, what is the composition of Standing Together? Are there equal numbers of Jews and Palestinians who are members? And in terms of leadership, it sounds like there's equal leadership, but we're wondering about membership itself, and if you could comment on that.
I do think that I don't have the recent statistics. I think the last one before the war, a while back, it was around 30-70%. So actually the Palestinians are overrepresented from their population, from our population percentage. In the leadership, of course, it's 50-50. I do think in our student chapters, Palestinians are much more represented than 30%. We really tend to attract many Palestinian youth recently, and especially in the last 3.5-4 months now. We definitely have attracted a very large amount of Palestinian citizens of Israel.
Great. Allison asks, do you know if there's a significant percentage of Palestinians in the territories who would align with a cooperative effort and ceasefire and who would renounce Hamas? Do you have a sense of what's happening in the territories in terms of your work? I know it's very hard for you to do your work there, but it's
We don't organize in the West Bank, obviously not in Gaza, that's impossible, but also not in the West Bank. We do collaborate with some cross-border organizations as well as Palestinian organizations with solidarity actions there. We don't do it not because we don't want to, but because we don't, our theory of change really stems from understanding how we build political will within Israel, and that means Israeli citizens. About support, I'm not an expert. I do think, according to polls, unfortunately, Hamas has actually gained a lot of more support, both in the West Bank and in Gaza.
Molly asks, it seems that given coalition building around shared goals of peace, equality, and social justice, that Jewish American Zionists and Jewish American anti-Zionists might both find a place within your movement, that there's more of a focus on finding a way toward peace, equality, and social justice, rather than determining whether the state of Israel exists or should have been founded to begin with. Am I understanding correctly? So the question, about American Jewish Zionists and American Jewish anti-Zionists, are you taking these different factions' views into your thinking as you're organizing here in the United States?
Sally said she has something to say, but I'll say my quick answer, and then I want to hear Sally. I think we organize people based on their interests, and whoever sees their interest in peace and equality and social justice is welcome. I think people identify in different ways, and we're not really focused on identification and identity politics, but more about people's actual interests. And the names around these things are sometimes a hindrance towards moving forward. So we have people in our membership in Israel who would define themselves Zionist, and I'm sure of course, there are people who define themselves anti-Zionist. And I think we welcome and organize everybody as long as they're into peace and security and equality and social justice.
We don't have the privilege to gatekeep.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you. Helpful. Mara asks, do you already have contacts or relationships with Palestinians in our area with whom we can take next steps in dialogue? When we were organizing with you, I think very wisely, when we explained our own Jewish community here, that this would be a good step. We have many folks joining this today, and we'll listen to the recording, registered. Most are Jewish, but not all. Many other folks who are very interested in the issue and wanting to know how the Jewish community thinks about all this and how to be allies, etc., have registered. But we do know that our next steps in organizing here needs to be a joint Jewish, Palestinian, and allies kind of effort. So, maybe this is an offline, names and contacts, but do you have connections already with Palestinians in our area who would be good partners?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, no, I think it's a question, first of all, maybe for you, Nancy, and for the organizers, and we can deep dive in this, I think, in the breakout room we have about organizing. There we have connections with various communities all over the states, but they need to be developed. So I think that's for the breakout room.
Yeah, I do want to be frank that also, unfortunately, the BDS statement can be quite harmful at this moment, and we're trying to manage the damage that it will do within Palestinian communities. We are hopeful. We are in touch with many Palestinian partners in the US who are helping us with this, as well as other progressive partners, from Black Lives Matter and from other, progressive non-Jewish, non-Palestinian, organizations, to try to understand how we can bridge this baffling development.
Could you please give folks, not everybody knows the background here in terms of the statement that came out from the Palestinian BDS movement and the condemnation around normalization. If you could just say a few words so everyone's on board.
Okay. It's actually not from the National BDS Committee. It's from a fraction of that, BACP. It's like a academic and cultural boycott. And yeah, we were called out as a whitewashing propaganda of the settler colonial apartheid Israel. And yeah, with insinuations that we are funded by the government. Obviously, very baseless accusations, but unfortunately, many people consume these kind of statements as you know, the compass of Palestinian support. We luckily, you know, it doesn't affect us here. Luckily, BDS doesn't have any relevance to Israeli society, including the Palestinian society in Israel. With that being said, we understand that it can impact our communities abroad and our friends abroad. And it definitely can impact our reach to Palestinians, you know, Palestinian diaspora. So it's important for us to deal with that, and we are trying to do it in the best way possible, you know, without being, you know, defensive to baseless accusations, of course. So we're trying to do it in the best way possible, and just have our mission and our theory of change as accessible to people as possible. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Rachel asked, does Standing Together have a position on the longer term core issue of justice for Palestinian refugees from 48 and 67? Do you think Palestinians in Israel feel like they have to choose between coalitions with leftist Israeli Jews on the one hand and with the wider Palestinian and Arab world on the other?
I don't think so, not at all. I think, you know, as a Palestinian in Israel, I have many privileges. I have a very unique mission. I have a very unique position to influence the Israeli public, not as a Palestinian, but also as part of Israeli society. And I take this privilege very seriously, and I assume that responsibility, while also assuming, you know, collectively for the Palestinian people to fight for us, not just as an Israeli citizen, but as the collective of Palestinian people. And yes, when we talk about, you know, peace, and I really mentioned it already, of course, you know, once we end the occupation and have peace, you know, we also need to reach, you know, stages of reconciliation and healing and historic justice, which all of us will need to work towards, and we hold that truth. You know, I think all Palestinians hold that, you know, idea, and we need to understand how it actually will happen. But I think holding that truth doesn't mean you have to lead with it, especially not when you're working from our unique position in Israel.
Yeah, makes so much sense. Thank you. Carol asks, if Israelis can succeed, please God, in having, she didn't say that, I did, in having Netanyahu call for an election, would Standing Together get involved in supporting a new group of leaders? That is, would you actually make an endorsement that way, or what's your connection with elections?
Nadav, me, or yeah, I can. Okay. Standing Together as a people's movement, as a grassroots movement, will cease to exist if it becomes a political party. We understand, you know, deep social and political changes happened only through social movements. We need a social movement. We understand that we can create an ecosystem that can birth, you know, the leadership and the, you know, the kind of parties and the kind of leaderships that will actually, you know, advance our vision and our politics. And maybe in the next elections, we might find some people and some coalitions and some even broader coalition of politicians and new leaders that might actually create this new left that we are building. Absolutely.
Yeah, Beautiful. Yeah, very grassroots, very much a change of culture, very much opening of possibility, very much creating connections throughout the society. So that's the focus. That's beautiful. I wish we had more time for questions and answers. You may not because it's very late there, but we are so grateful. We're going to shift into our breakout groups. And so I wanted to say a word about that. And I acknowledge there are more questions than we were able to get to. So let me just say a word about the breakout groups and then we'll go into them. We really hope everybody will stay. Let me just, even before going over the meeting norms, let me just say how this is going to work. We're going to break out for about 20 minutes, and these will be facilitated groups. And when I'm done speaking here, you will see the choices pop up on your screen, and all you need to do is choose one. We have 8 groups. And I'm going to tell you what they are now because they'll be referenced very briefly when you see the choices. Group 1 is if you want to be part of creating and or taking part in a local Friends of Standing Together chapter right here in the Valley. And Nadav and Tamar will facilitate that. Group 2, if you'd like to brainstorm some ideas for further local programming to support peace, equality, and social justice in Israel and Palestine, please choose number 2 with Rabbi Ricky Kosofsky and Judy Wish. It will be a brainstorming of future programming, not specifically Standing Together, but other area-wide programming. Groups 3 and 7 are simply for sharing thoughts, feelings, and reactions that may have arisen for you, hearing Sally and Nadav's presentation and their response to questions. And those groups will be led variously by Sarah Schley and Kara Michelle Silverberg, Sarah Weinberger, Rabbi Jacob Fine, Molly Bagat, and myself. And the last group, Group 8, for those of you who are connected in a big way to life on college campuses, you might be a student, a faculty member, an administrator, etc. We really thought it would be great for you to be able to talk together, to share your thoughts and feelings arising from today's presentation that connect specifically to life on campuses, the challenges and opportunities there. And that will be led by Professors Mira Benjamin and Rachel Green. And now just a few words, Miriam, thank you, that little slide about norms in our breakout rooms. So we just ask everybody to please agree to these norms. Please keep your video on if at all possible. Stay on mute except when you're called on. Listen to each other attentively with compassion and respect. Raise your actual hand or the digital emoji hand to speak and wait to be recognized by the facilitator before speaking. And we really feel that these will be generative, also informative, and an important part of our program today. When we're done with those, you'll go right back into, you don't have to choose anything. You'll go right back into the plenary for a few-minute wrap-up led by Tamar. So with no further ado, let's choose our breakout rooms. Miriam's going to get that started.
Welcome back, everybody. As you re-enter the plenary, I hope we didn't drop anybody in that transition. I want to thank especially Amy for spontaneously becoming a facilitator in one of our groups. I know it was short, but I hope that it gave everybody who participated a sense of being part of the community, part of a community that is safe to express yourself, to ask questions, to have different political vantage points, but to come together and listen to each other. This is so important. If anything, our message of, don't dehumanize the other, and you don't need to take one side. This is not a binary issue. And that's the case that I think everybody is yearning for, even in the United States. We don't need to dehumanize the other person. We're all caring in our way, and we're all striving. In the chat, There is a Google form. Please fill it out if you're comfortable with that kind of technology. It'll take 10 to 20 seconds. It'll allow us to know if you want to stay connected with us. You will be receiving an email with a recording of this event. We had a lot of people register for this event that didn't come, and they will definitely want to get this recording, so it will be going out to everybody. I want to remind you that in the chat, Nadav put information and links about how to make a donation today, either a one-time donation, or a monthly Standing Together, Friends of Standing Together donation. So those are all in the chat. We mentioned earlier that Sally Abed was a host of a podcast that I have to give a plug for. It's called Groundwork. It has a lot to do with the issues that Standing Together is working towards, so feel free to check out that podcast. On behalf of Nancy Flam and myself, I want to express our deep appreciation to all of you for coming, and to our sponsors. A big thank you to Miriam Cudler-Flam for helping with all things technological on this Zoom. A big thanks to our facilitators, including Amy, Judy Wish, Rabbi Ricky Kasowski, Molly Baggett, I'm sorry, I said that wrong, Bagot, Sarah Weinberger, Rabbi Jacob Fine, Sarah Schley, Professor Mara Benjamin, Kara Michelle Silverberg, and Professor Rachel Green. And most of all, a big thank you to Sally Abed and Nadav Shofet for their inspirational and courageous leadership. Before I say goodbye, I want to hold you for just a few more seconds to take a moment of silence, just a few short seconds, to hold in our hearts all the suffering that is occurring in this world, and especially the suffering and traumatized from violence in Israel and West Bank and Gaza. I hope that this afternoon we have planted some positive seeds. I hope that we leave each of you today a bit inspired with a sense of hope, community, and agency. As Rabbi Akiva teaches, if I am not for myself, who am I? If I am only for myself, what am I? And if not now, then when? I look forward to seeing you all soon. Thank you, and have a good rest of your day.